And welcome back to Pokemon Team Creation Series. Today's Pokemon team comes for us from CJM. What's the question? What is Alex Simmons, aka Spawn's Pokemon team? This proved to be a tricky scenario because there are a lot of the things that makes Spawn just doesn't really exist in the proper capacity in the Pokemon universe. For example, I had to kind of really stretch to find something that would represent Lilith of the Seventh House, or aka his suit, the look of Spawn. And that I had to find something. I struggled to find that. The fact that Spawn has tendency to still use a lot of firearms. There's no real firearms in Pokemon in terms of a Pokemon that represents it. So I mean, and then you get the whole, the angsty loner thing. There's a whole bunch of Pokemon that could fit that. So he's another one that proved to be a bit tricky, to be honest. But I think I got at least something that is a rough approximation, give or take, of what his team would look like. This is all subject to change or all subject to opinion. So if you have an idea of what you'd like to do for his team beyond this, put it in the comments below. Let me know what you'd do differently. First up, and this was the last one to make it on the list, I went with Absol. Absol was last to be on the list because I just needed that fifth spot. I had all the other five mostly picked out, and I just needed a sixth member. But Absol, I think, at least works to some degree because Absol, while being a dark type, aka the evil type, is not an inherently bad or evil Pokemon. It's said to cause disasters, but what it actually can do is predict disasters and try to warn people. But people think it causes the disaster, so it's got a bad rep. This kind of goes towards Spawn as well. Spawn is not an evil individual. He is a Hellspawn, but he's actually not an evil individual. He's a dark individual. He will do things that might be considered an evil thing to do, but ultimately he is an anti-hero through and through. This means that while he is trying to do some sort of good in the world with the lot he's been given, he is still judged based on being a Hellspawn and everything that comes with that. So I thought Absol made a good fit. Next, I want something to represent his ability to melt in shadows. And we have two Mon that represent that. The first up is Marshadow. Marshadow, literally, its whole shtick is hiding in shadow and copying the fighting movements of other Pokemon or people while in the shadow, mimicking their shadows movements and basically learning their techniques. Because it's I won't say too much. There is a ghost fighting type coming in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet if you're someone who hasn't been keeping up with the spoilers. I won't say anything more than that if you haven't been keeping up with them. I think most people who watch this probably have, but still, regardless, there is one new ghost fighting type coming. That said, Marshadow is still the original ghost fighting type, and it also has a form change, which can represent Spawn being able to kind of mold and change its motif. I always liked Marshadow. I wish that we had other ghost fighting types that are a little easier to get, and hope, from what I understand, this new one is not going to be easy to get, but still not a mythic or rare. Oh, pardon. So I do wish we could get more with that, but so I think for a Mon that can hide in shadows, I think that's a good one. Same with Mega Gengar. Now I chose Mega Gengar over regular Gengar because I want something to give that extra boost on the team, the kind of extra, hey, I am capable of using mysticism, magic, very powerful spell casting, necro casting, all that kind of stuff. Control the elements kind of power up, and Mega Evolution is a good way to illustrate power ups. Plus, Gengar, we know, is another ghost type that can hide in shadows. I knew I needed at minimum two ghost types on the team to represent the fact that Alec is a guy who died and came back to life. Well, that would be a ghost type Mon. Unfortunately, a lot of ghost Mons just don't really fit the same motif. I also wanted to represent his ability to use weaponry. While firearms really didn't fall into the equation, although any of these Mon could learn like a beam attack of some kind. Blades, chains, spikes, they're all still something that he has access to. His suit usually can create them. So I'm like, okay, is there something I can do with that? Steel type, perhaps. I went with Bisharp. Now, Bisharp has the added benefit of being a dark type. And it's basically just a body of blades is what it is. I never used the Bisharp on my team, but if I get the chance, maybe. The problem is I have seen the leaks. without going into much detail, we're going to be getting a lot of good steel. And my Fuecoco, my boy Fuecoco, will be turning into a Ghost Fire type. So but there's a lot of good Ghost types, and there's a lot of good Steel types in this gen. So I'm like, no, all the mod I want to use. I can't. The terrestrializing thing only can go so far as to give me a balanced team. It's like, damn it. But maybe if I get a chance, I'll use Bisharp if I get a chance. But that's only if I get a chance. It still also evolves at a relatively high level. I think the 40s is what it evolves at, if I'm not mistaken. So it takes a while to get to a Bisharp from a Pawniard. Let me see here. What does it evolve at again? Bisharp. Beep 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 sharp barp 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 beep 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 sharp. There we go. Bisharp. Oh yeah, level 52. Christ. I thought it was the 40s, no, 50s. That's like one of the few knocks I have against Gen 5. Is so many of those mon evolved at such ridiculous levels. It wasn't even funny. Like, I think Game Freak really dropped the ball. I think they even realized they kind of dropped the ball on that. I digress, though. So, Bisharp, though, is still, I think, a good candidate for this. Plus, it looks like a warrior, which would fit towards Spawn because he is very much a warrior. And then we get to the two big ones. Right out the gate, just get out of the way. Arceus is on this team. You can go with the Ghost type, whatever type you want to go with. Fairy, as close as you could probably get to a Divine typing. But he's on the team, and this is due to the fact that at one point Spawn became more or less God. The only one that outranked him was the mother of all creation, and he couldn't kill Satan or God for the balance sake. Other than that, though, Divine Spawn was a being of immense godlike power. So I thought having Arceus on the team just kind of made sense. That was a very famous run for Spawn. But the last one on the team, this is where I had to really think on it. This is where I went with the Lilith of the 7th house, the symbiotic suit that is essentially the look of Spawn. The look of Spawn is actually the suit, is actually a living being that he wears. And it feeds off his necroplasm, but also feeds off anger and hate to strengthen itself and feed his powers. Now, I struggled last time with when I did Spider-Man's team about looking for a Venom-type Pokemon. There is nothing even remotely close to Venom, unfortunately, in the Pokemon world. It just isn't. But Lilith is kind of a different entity in some because of the way Lilith functions specifically. So I looked and I struggled, and I ultimately came down to Dawn, and this is a fuzzy image. I probably should have found a better image, but Dawnwing Necrozma. Now, I wanted to go with the Dawnwing instead of the other one due to the fact that it's attached to Lunala, who's a ghost type. So right at the gate, I wanted to go with that. But Dawnwing Necrozma is based on Necrozma, which has attached and is controlling, to some degree, Lunala. And beyond that, it's feeding off of, and both versions of Necrozma, when you're talking about these, again, it was Dawnwing, and what was the other one? Hold on. Dawnwing and Necrozma, there you are. Dawnwing and Duskmane, that was it. Duskmane and Dawnwing are versions of Necrozma that are feeding off of, and powering, to be fair, the light of the host. This goes towards the idea of Lilith being parasitic, feeding off of the necroplasm of Alec. Now, granted, because Necrozma feeds off of light in general, it also goes to the idea of Lilith feeding off of any form of necroplasm or hate or evil or whatever to strengthen it, which would ultimately bring it to its ultra Necrozma state, ultra Necrozma, yeah. So that would bring it to that form, which in theory is another way you could theoretically get to Divine Spawn as well, is another idea for that style. But ultimately, this is the best I felt I could do with Lilith. I think it's not a bad representation of it, especially given how Necrozma is functioning in this form versus how Lilith functions overall. If you could think of a better alternative to Lilith of the 7th house in terms of Pokemon, I'd like to know. Furthermore, if you have what do you think of this team? Definitely not the most balanced team in the world. I mean, you got 1, 2, 3 ghost types, one Pokemon that can be any type. So in theory, it can it can help balance out, but generally speaking, it's a normal type. So you got 3 ghost types, none of which are pure ghost types, though, and none of which also share an element. So there is that benefit. You also got 2 dark types, 1 steel type, 1 psychic type, and 1 fighting type, and 1 poison type. Looking at this team quickly, I will say that I would say not ghost types, but ghost types to a degree. Dark types would also be having a bit of a day with this team. Let's see here. For Ghost, so that, I mean, actually, it's not as unbalanced as I originally thought. Psychic types are actually pretty useless against this team. Yeah, honestly, the only struggle this team kind of has is about half the team is completely OHKO'd by fighting types, unless Arceus decides to change his type. The psychic ghost type, but the ghost types alleviate normal and they alleviate the fighting weakness. Let's see. Then I'm just looking at all the other weaknesses real quick. Only one of them is really hurt by psychic, so there's that. And again, not by a huge margin. Fairy is a problem for this team. I will definitely say that. Because you got 3 dark types, 1 dark fighting type. One of them is a dark steel type, so it does help mitigate that to some degree, but not by a huge margin. The poison typing helps out against things like grass, helps out against fairy thanks to Gengar, and it's a Mega Gengar. So, looking at this, it's actually not as unbalanced as you might think. Especially because you have Arceus that can be any type. So if there is, say, a fighting type wreaking havoc on the team a little bit, well, then you can but you have ghost types there. But if you have, like, say, a fairy type, well, then just turn into a steel or a poison type, pure poison type, and you got that taken care of. So it's not as unbalanced as you might think. It's still not a perfectly balanced team. I don't think there's anything, or there's no such thing as a perfectly balanced team. But regardless, that is just my thoughts on what I'd do with the team. Let me know in the comments below if you would do it. What would you do with the team? Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. And I'll see you folks next time.